Hi everybody, welcome to your GCSE English Language Revision live stream session. It's great to have you with us this afternoon. My name is Shamima and joining me I have Cara, I have Jess and Jenny, who are all teachers at Academy21. And so Jess and Jenny will be responding to your questions and queries throughout the session. You're all very welcome. It's great to have you with us. And we hope you find the session useful as you revise for your English language GCSE. So before we actually make a start, I'd like to draw your attention to a few things that we have on the platform. So as you can see, there's a Q&A pod, which is just underneath the file pod to the right-hand side of the slide. And that's where you can put in any queries and questions that you might have throughout the session. And both Jenny and Jess will be responding to your questions for the duration. So please do say hello to Jenny and Jess, and I'm sure they will respond to you in due course. There are a few other features that I'd like to draw your attention to on the platform as well. So we have a file pod just in the top right-hand corner, and there's some files in there for you to download. So the file pod for the session, the content of the session, is in a PDF document. So you can view that and download it to help you support with your revision for your English language GCSE. Additionally, there is a certificate for you to download as you have attended the session. During the session, we will also be using some poll questions, so do please participate in those. The polls are anonymous and only we can see your responses. And you can see an example of the poll pod just in the centre of the screen there. Okay, so now we're going to make a start on the live presentation. So welcome everybody. I can see lots of you logging in here right now. Welcome, a warm welcome to you all. So Cara and I will take you through the GCSE English Language, AQA, Paper 1 and Paper 2. So hopefully by the end of the session, you will understand both papers, know exactly what you're assessed on with the assessment objectives, learn some top tips, and please do ask some questions along the way throughout the session. So we're now going to begin with our very first poll. And as you can see, there are three statements on the screen. So statement A, statement B, and statement C. So have a look very carefully at the statements and see if you can identify the ones which are true. And I will just switch the poll on. So the poll is just available underneath the Q&A pod. See if you can choose the ones that are true. So I'll just give you a moment to have a look at the statements again. You can put your answers into the Q&A pod if you'd like, or you could click them in the poll. Oh, well done. Excellent. I can see lots of you polling correctly there. And lots of you still arriving as well. Hello, welcome everybody. Fantastic. Most of you have polled correctly on there. Thank you, everybody. Now let's take a look at the answers. So statement A was false. The creative writing task appears on paper 1, section B. Both statement B and statement C are true. So for paper 2, it does include a task to write and present a viewpoint. And both papers do have the duration of 1 hour and 45 minutes. Thank you, everybody. Well done on that first poll. I'll now take that away and I'll hand over to Cara, who's going to take you through paper 1.
Afternoon, everyone, and welcome. So I'm Cara, one of the teachers here at Academy21, English teacher, and also, like all of us on the team today, an experienced examiner. So just going to take you through a bit of an overview of paper 1, and then I'm going to go through some of the questions with you. You can download the whole of today's presentation if you look where I'm pointing over in the top of the screen, because I won't be reading through the whole thing. So please do download it to help you with your revision. So paper 1 is on Friday, and what we have in front of you here is a quick overview. So there are 4 reading questions, and they each have their own number of marks. So what I would like you to think about is, and have a little look, is which question gains you the most marks. So question 1 is 4 marks, and for question 1 you have to list 4 things. Question 2 is language analysis, and we're going to look very briefly at question 2 in this session. Question 3 is analysis of structure, and we're going to briefly look at that question today as well. And then for question 4, later on I am going to show you an example answer. So question for you, which one gains the most marks? Do vote in the poll if you've not already done so. I can see lots of correct answers coming in. So lots of you going for question 4, and that is absolutely right. Well done. Loads of you getting that one correct in the poll pod and also in the chat as well. So 20 marks for question 4. So just notice the balance of marks on paper 1. There are a lot of marks for question 4. And bear in mind, this is AQA. If you are doing a different exam board, then the balance of marks may be slightly different, but the skills are the same. So thank you everyone who got involved there in the chat and in the poll. So I've also got this grid to briefly show you. Again, I'm not going to go through it in lots of detail. Section A of the paper is the reading, which we're going to go through first, and then a little bit later on I'm going to go through the writing with you. It's a fiction paper, so it's all about stories, reading stories, looking at language, and then having a go at doing some fiction writing yourself. So it's very much your fiction paper, whereas paper 2 is your non-fiction paper. So let's get into looking at some of the questions, and what we've chosen to go through is the questions that sometimes people find a little bit confusing. So on the AQA, questions 2 and 3 are both assessing AO2, Assessment Objective 2, but they are looking at different skills. So question 2 asks you to look at language. So things like similes, verbs, adjectives, metaphors. This is the one where you're zooming in on keywords and looking at meanings and connotations. Question 3 on AQA is different because they want you to look at structural features. So shifts in focus, cyclical structures, looking at the text as a whole and exploring the effect on the reader. If you are doing AQA, then avoid writing about language or analysing language when you do the structure question. So that's the confusion that often arises. So let's have a look at some examples. So for question 2, over on the left, we have how does the writer use language to describe the hyena's appearance? So it's a nice to the point question that is asking you to look at words, phrases, language devices, sentences. Question 3 is a little bit longer. The lovely thing with AQA is question 3 is always the same. It's just the text that changes. And it's asking you to consider how the text is structured to interest you as a reader. What I would always recommend, and I teach this to all my students here at Academy21, is to underline keywords. And this is how I would do it. So using words like reader in your response, using words like focus at the beginning and develop. So if you draw out keywords from that question, it will help you to focus on the right thing in your answer. And that's for all your exam questions. So with paper 1, question 3, think about the structure as a journey. And I love this image. So think about how the text is organized. How does the text start? Where do we begin? Are we in a busy action setting, or is it describing a place? Are we in a character's head? Think about the middle of the extract. Where do we go next? Does something change? Is there a new focus? And then very importantly, this is the bit that students often forget, is just do something about the end of the extract. So have a look. Where have they ended it? Is there some repetition? Is there a cyclical structure? And finally, do remember to use quotes from the text in the structure question. So they still want you to include evidence. If you have any questions as we go, please do ask in the Q&A. I have 2 of our fantastic teaching colleagues answering your questions. going to briefly look at question 4 before we hand over to look at paper 2. So question 4 is evaluation based on a section of the text, and this is a tricky skill, but I would encourage you to definitely try question 4 because, as we know, it's worth a huge 20 marks. So this is where you have to agree or disagree with a statement and then prove it. You can write about language for question 4, so techniques, connotations. You can also write about structure. So you can include everything for question 4, whatever is relevant, talking about the effect on the reader, any methods that you can find. And here's an example of a question 4, and we've already highlighted the keywords for you. My main piece of advice for you, my top tip going into the exam, is give question 4 a go, because you will pick up some marks, even if you find it tricky. So if you're not confident, still have a go. Choose some quotes, focus on some of the keywords. So this question asks you to think about wealth and glamour. So try and find some quotes about wealth. Try and find some quotes about glamour. Have a go. Give it your best shot. I have for you a response that we're going to have a little look at, and I am going to put a poll up for this one as well. Obviously, we're going quite fast because we only have a 45-minute session today, but I would encourage you to download the resource and you can have this as something helpful for your own revision. So this is part of a response. This is not the whole response. I want you to notice what they use. So do they use quotations? Do they analyse language? Have they written a narrative? Do they use evaluative adverbs? So I'll read it through. The writer skillfully uses phrases such as enormous gardens and a corps of caterers to communicate the scale of the parties to us. He uses listing such as the whisperings and the champagne and the stars to make the party seem magical. Interesting verbs like dissolve and form, weave and glide also make the people seem magical and like they are in some kind of a fairy tale. So lots of you are voting. So they use evaluative adverbs. So words like skillfully. I was marking a student's work today, one of my year 11s, and my target for them was to try and use some evaluative adverbs. So showing that you're answering that question. The one that's got the most votes in the poll is quotations. So notice how they are using plenty of quotations. They're using the point, evidence, explain structure, getting those quotations in, so important in the exam. They're also considering the writer's methods. So this particular response is more about language. They're not really writing about structure, but it's okay. For question 4, you can draw on language, you can draw on structure, whatever is appropriate for that text. So they're talking about the use of listing and they're talking about the use of verbs. So that's paper 1. I'm just going to take us back to the grid that I showed you at the beginning and just sum up the top tips, and then I will hand over to Shamima for paper 2, and you will hear from me again in a moment when I'll talk about the writing paper. So just to sum up then, paper 1 reading, you do need to be very aware of the different numbers of marks. Do make sure that you allow enough time for question 4, and do bear in mind that you need to make sure you're focusing on language for question 2 and structure for question 3. And they would be my main top tips. I will speak to you again a little bit later on when I'm going to talk to you about the writing. But for now, I will hand over to Shamima.
Thank you, Cara. So now I'm going to take you through a little bit about paper 2. So as Cara said, paper 2 is your non-fiction paper, and some of the skills are slightly different to paper 1. So for paper 2, you are working with 2 non-fiction sources, source A and source B, which are linked by a topic or a theme. Be aware that the reading skills are going to be focusing on either both sources or one source. So it's really important that you look at your question carefully, Read your question carefully, underline your keywords, and check that you have the correct source and the correct section. A really good top tip is to have a look at your question once you've got your source, and if you're looking at a section in the source, draw a box around it so you know that you're actually quoting from the correct section. For the transactional writing section, section B of paper 2, this is your non-fiction writing. This is also worth 40 marks, so notice it's a 40-40 split between the two sections. And this is where you only have one task. There isn't a choice on paper 2, and you have to produce a piece of non-fiction writing which suits the question. The assessment objectives are exactly the same as section B on paper 1, so AO5 and AO6, but the task is different because you're producing non-fiction. So now I'm going to take you through an overview of the reading section of paper 2. So notice that there are 4 key questions there, and it's really important to know exactly what you're assessed on. So if you have a look at question 1, you're choosing 4 true statements. It is AO1, but approach this question as though it's a process of elimination. So it's usually from one source, so check that you have the correct source. Have a look at the statements and cross-check them very carefully. Question 2 is your synthesizing question. So this one is focused on the synthesizing skill, and this is where you are looking at the writer's ideas and inferring those particular ideas in relation to the focus of the question. You're working with both sources. The question 3, this is your language analysis question, and this will be just one of the sources, so check which source it is, and you have to look at a section in the text and analyse the language. So that means you're looking at things like similes and metaphors, personification, verbs, adjectives, it all counts. So pure language analysis, and it's worth 12 marks. Question 4 is the different skill. This is where you are comparing each writer's viewpoints in relation to the focus of the question. Do be aware that it's different to question 2 because you're analysing the writer's methods and how those methods are used to show the viewpoints of each writer. And it's worth 16 marks. So lots of students tend to confuse question 2 and question 4. So let's concentrate on those 2 and have a look at how they're different. So for question 2, notice it's 8 marks. This is your synthesizing skill. And as it's 8 marks, we recommend that you spend approximately 10 minutes on that question. Don't spend ages on it. You only need really 2 really good paragraphs to answer question 2. Question 4 is worth more marks. It's 16 marks, and this is where you're comparing both sources and you're looking at the writer's viewpoints through the writer's methods. And we do recommend you spend approximately longer on that one, so 20 minutes on question 4. Now let's take a look at question 2 in a bit more detail. So for question 2, you're synthesizing. This means that you don't retell the examiner what happens in each source. You won't get any marks if you're discussing language features or sentence forms in detail. What you must do, and that's really important, is to infer the main ideas in relation to the focus of the question to gain a level 2 or more. So it's really important that you check your question. Are you synthesizing similarities or differences? Understand each writer's main viewpoint. So think about the key ideas. What is the writer saying on the topic? Support your points with relevant quotations. So try and use short quotations. They're more specific. Make sure that you have a balanced response. So don't just talk about source A. Make sure you talk about both sources in relation to the question. Try to understand the deeper meanings to infer. So essentially, you're bringing the information together, write 2 paragraphs that blend the ideas from both sources. So if you're looking at differences, use the appropriate phrase, such as in contrast or however. If you're synthesizing similarities, make sure you use something like likewise to signal to the examiner. Now let's take a look at an example question. This question is from the June 2022 paper. And remember, source A and source B are going to be linked by a theme. And this theme is campsites. So the question says that you need to write a summary of what you understand about the differences between the two camping sites. Always read your question carefully, and as you can see here, we've got some of the keywords and phrases highlighted and underlined, and it's worth 8 marks. Remember, you need to just be able to infer to gain a level 2 or more. So let's take a look at what a candidate wrote, and this is what they produced in the exam. And then we'll poll in just a moment to see what's missing from the response. So this is what they wrote. In source A, the writer uses language to talk about the campsite and the rain and thunder. But in source B, the writer is talking about the lovely weather. Okay, we're now going to poll to see if you can work out what's missing from that response. I'm just going to open the poll, have a look at the options. Can you work out what's actually missing? That's really important to help the candidates gain a level 2 or more. So I'll pause for a moment whilst you're all polling there. Excellent, well done. Lots of you polled correctly on that one. Thank you, everybody. Well done. I'm going to pause the poll now. Thank you, everybody who has polled. And if you chose option C, you got it right. Well done. So what was missing was the inference. So this response is a very simple awareness. There is simple text detail that's mentioned, but it's not focused on the campsite. Instead, the simple difference is about the weather. So it's really, really important to make sure that you infer so that you gain a level 2 or more. So let's take a look at a better response. So as you can see, this particular response is far more detailed. And this is the kind of detail that you need to be able to achieve a really good mark. So this candidate has given an overview sentence. Both campsites are very different. You only really need one overview sentence. You don't need to go into 3 or 4 sentences. And they've used the point, evidence, explain structure as they've started their synthesizing. So they've explored source A first with some short quotations for their evidence and the explanation that follows. Notice how they have inferred in their explanation. So use phrases like this suggests, this implies in their explanation. They've then used an appropriate discourse marker to signal to the examiner that they're synthesizing differences. And then they've explored source B, and they've given some short quotations for their evidence and an explanation that follows. Now, as you can see, the parts in green is where the candidate is showing inference. So when you're writing your explanations, try to infer as best as you can in relation to the question, and they're inferring the differences of the campsites. So this is a full response. It achieved full marks. You can read that in more detail. It is available in the PDF in the file pod. So now let's take a look at question 4. So question 4 is different. You have to compare the sources and make sure that you're looking at how the writer's viewpoints are being shown by analysing the methods. So in this one, you have the different thoughts and feelings about camping experiences. So try your very best to make sure that you're writing in detail in this one and spend a bit more time as it's worth more marks. And so have a look at the question. You can see the keywords are underlined. And they are, the focus there is looking at the differences. So it's not the actual campsites, but it's what the writer's thoughts and feelings are, their experiences of camping altogether. Notice the second bullet point mentions methods. So this means that you can write about a wide range of writing methods. Let's have a look at what we mean by methods. So the writer's viewpoints and perspectives are shown through the tone and through the methods. Be aware that the writer's tone could be ironic, it could be humorous, it could be critical. Also be aware that the tone can shift and change. So it could be a shift between action and reflection, or present tense and past tense. So make sure that you're aware of that and ask yourself those questions. What sort of a tone is it? Does it change? And where does it change and shift? So if a writer is using a type of language method, such as hyperbole, to show their viewpoint, then you can analyse it and include it in your response. Now, one tip that you need to be sure of is that you are understanding what the writer's viewpoint is, not that of someone who appears in the text. So, for example, in the June 2022 source A, the writer is Emma Kennedy, and it is her attitude that you're analysing about the camping experience. Even though her mother appears in the text, we're not writing about the attitude of her mother just because she appears in the text. So now let's show you an example. This is a partial response for question 4. And I'm not going to read the whole response, so you can do that in your own time when you're revising. It is available in the file pod. But as you can see from this example, this is a simultaneous multiple comparison. What I mean by that is that you discuss source A, then you directly compare it with source B, and you keep going until you cover the main viewpoints of each writer, analysing their methods. Now, there's no set way of how to compare. You can write about all of source A first, then all of source B, and compare. But what's most important is that you must ensure you write about both to access the level 3 and above. I'm now going to hand over to Cara, who's going to take you through Paper 1, Section B.
Hello again, everyone, and welcome to everybody who joined us while we were going through the reading sections. So we're going to spend a few minutes looking at the writing sections of the exam. We have spent a bit longer on reading because there's more questions, but do remember that there are as many marks for your writing as there are for your reading. So do make sure you allow enough time. There is a little question on the screen. I don't have a poll for this one, but do put the answer in the Q&A. So the question is, how many marks are awarded for technical accuracy? So you've got 40 marks, and this is for both the writing questions. So it's 24 marks for the content, so 24 marks for what you write and how you organise it, how you start, how you finish, and then 16 marks for your spelling, your punctuation, your grammar, your use of sentence constructions. So we recommend around about 45 minutes on the writing. So 45 minutes on the writing for paper 1 and 45 minutes for the writing on paper 2. If you qualify for extra time, you can add a little bit more to that. Do make sure you do some planning, and this is for both writing tasks, so paper 1 and paper 2, and they recommend about half an hour of writing and then 5 to 10 minutes reviewing, editing and redrafting. So the answer to the question, and well done if you got that right, is 16 marks. So 16 of your marks are for the accuracy and the quality of your writing. So do make sure that you check your work through. It's quality over quantity. So here's an example of a paper 1 writing task, and Shamima will show you a paper 2 task in a few minutes. So this one has got 2 choices. You can describe a place at sunset, or you can write a story about a new beginning. So very open, very creative, very imaginative. Think about which task you would choose. You can let us know, or you can just think about it in your head. This is a common type of task for the AQA paper 1 writing. There's normally a description or a narrative. You'll notice both of them are linked. So you might write a story that is set in a city. You might include a sunset in your story. There is no right or wrong, so choose whichever task most appeals to you from the 2 that are on offer, and be as creative as you can. Imaginative. So I have 2 examples to show you. Again, you can download those if you look at the pod at the top of the screen and have a proper read. But both of the responses begin to fulfill the imaginative writing criteria. So the one on the left, A, is more of a description. It says, as the sun dips below the horizon, the street beside the beach transforms into a canvas of colours. So it's looking at the scene, it's thinking about colour, and it's using vocabulary. The second one includes some characters, Amelia and Oliver. They're having a conversation. There's a journey that's going to commence. Amelia said, "Are you ready?" Oliver nodded, his eyes as hard as stone. So notice it's still using vocabulary and techniques, but it's got a sense of some characters and something's going to happen and there is a story. I have included in the PDF a brief overview of some of the writing skills. So for descriptive writing, there's a little list of things that you can think about. Do feel free to download this and use it in your revision. And then for narrative writing, I've just reminded you of something we teach here at Academy21, which is the concept of the story mountain. Keep it simple would be my main tip. 45 minutes is not very long to write a story or a piece of description. So do keep it simple and make sure that you check your work. But it's a lovely task. It's the most creative part of the paper, I think, and it's the only part on AQA where you get a choice. So that's the paper 1 writing, the creative writing. I'm now going to hand over to Shamima, who's going to talk to you about the paper 2 writing, which is transactional.
Thank you, Cara. So paper 2 is your transactional writing task. So remember, you don't have a choice for this particular section in the exam. There is only one task and you have to have a go at answering it. So it's we recommend that you spend 45 minutes on this particular section. So read your question very carefully, underline your keywords, and try and use this acronym PAFT that we teach at Academy21. So this is where you identify the writing purpose. So for example, are you persuading? You identify your audience, that is who your text is aimed at. And it's important to write in the correct form. So that means the type of text that you need to produce. So check your question and have a look at whether it's an article you're writing, a letter, or a speech. And also adopt the correct tone and style to suit the audience and to fulfill the writing purpose. And as you can see on the slide, there are some acronyms here that I'm sure some of you have heard of. We teach diversity at Academy21, so there's a list of writing methods that you can use and apply to help you fulfill your writing purpose. And there's also DIPS as well, where you can start to look at rhetorical devices. Remind yourself that the examiner is looking for developed ideas that are connected into paragraphs and looking at a range of punctuation, sentence forms, and ambitious vocabulary. So let's take a look at a question. This one is taken from the June 2022 paper, so I'll read it very quickly and demonstrate how to use PAFT. So holidays don't need to be far away and expensive. They just need to give people a break from everyday life and the chance to relax. Write an article for a magazine in which you argue your point of view on this statement. Now, you can choose to agree with the statement or disagree or partially agree. You can even choose a side for a strong response. But what's really important is to make sure that you apply the PAFT acronym. So work out the form. And in this question, the form is an article. So you should start to think about using a heading and have some clear, detailed paragraphs for your article. You don't need to write in columns for this one. You also need to make sure that you understand your writing purpose. And this one is writing to argue. So apply writing to argue techniques to make your argument convincing, things like rhetorical questions, facts, expert views, anecdote. Add evidence where you can. And this way, it will make your argument more convincing to support your points. You also need to make sure that you're using the correct tone for the audience. In this case, it's readers of the magazine article, so it's a wide audience. I would still try to keep your writing fairly formal and make sure that you write enough. A good range is what the examiner is looking for a level 3. So let's have a look at an example. I'm not going to read this. It is available in the PDF in the file pod in the top right-hand corner. So this is a partial response. Overall, it achieved a level 3, which is clear communication. So as you can see, it's a heading there at the top. Don't spend ages trying to think of a heading. If you are feeling stuck, I would leave that until the end. So make sure that you actually produce the article in detailed paragraphs, so a range of relevant ideas, paragraphs that are connected. Try and integrate your discourse markers to signal to your examiner that your writing has a clear direction. A range of examples and successful writing methods is what they're looking for a level 3. So do have a look at that in some detail when you can. Make sure that you do plan as well for this. It's important to make sure that you have a, a real guide of how you are having one key idea per paragraph. So apply the methods to make sure that you're fulfilling the writing purpose. So let me take you through the final part as we are a bit pushed for time. So a few tips for your timings. So just be aware that it's a 50-50 split. For section A and section B, it's worth 40 marks each. So 50% of your marks are for the writing section. So give yourself enough time for that. Allow 45 minutes. And don't forget to check your spelling, punctuation and grammar. If you do qualify for extra time, you should allow around 55 to 60 minutes. And one key tip that I should tell you is that you should at least spend a bit longer on section A questions with the high value mark questions. So particularly question 4 on paper 1, which is worth 20 marks, and question 4 on paper 2, which is worth 16. So it's so important to make sure that you get your timings right and try and go into the exam with a positive mindset, believe that you're capable, pace yourself and do your best. And we now have question time. So I can see lots of you have been putting some questions into the Q&A pod. And thank you very much to Jess and to Jenny who've been responding to your questions. Do feel free to add any further questions or anything you'd like clarifying about either paper, as we're all examiners here and happy to help where we can.
So I'll just take one question that's come in. How long should you spend on each question? So that's an interesting one. We've talked quite a lot about timings. It's roughly a mark a minute, roughly. So your 8 markers, you're spending about 10 minutes. The 40 mark writing, you're spending 45 minutes. So roughly a minute a mark. If you get 25% extra time, you can add a little bit onto that as well. But yeah, do you watch your timings? And I think certainly with paper 1, because question 4 is worth a whopping 20 marks on the AQA, do make sure that you cover it. Even if you don't feel too sure, just have a go because you will pick up some marks.
Another really good tip for paper 1 question 4 is to try and discuss the methods to gain a high mark within a level 3. So if you're able to do that, then you will be achieving a high mark in a level 3 for question 4.
I would just put in as well as a teacher and examiner, I think answering all the questions, even if you run out of time and you don't write a lot on some of them, is really, really important. So do watch your timings. If you are running out of time and you only are able to write a few lines on a question, it is well worth doing that because you will pick up some marks. So keep the questions coming in. We have a few minutes left still. Jenny and Jess are answering them, and we're also able to talk about some of them as well. Shamima, should we answer the question about how much should people write for the writing? Because I think we've got a really interesting bit of advice there, haven't we? For section B. Yeah, shall I cover that or do you want to do it?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Go
So
ahead.
okay, so for the writing section, as I said earlier, it's definitely quality over quantity. And the way Shameema put it when we were discussing this, which I really like, because we love working as a team here at Academy21. So the way Shameema put it was not some, but a range. And I think that's really, really good. You need enough writing to be able to show the examiners what you can do. So, you know, a 5-line paragraph is not going to be enough for section B. But on the other hand, if you're writing a story and you're writing sort of 7 pages and you've forgotten your punctuation, that's going to be too long. So it's about not some, but a range. You can always go back and add a little bit more. And another top tip from me would be if you're running out of time on section B, and you know that the exam's nearly over, bring your writing to some kind of a close. So if it's a story, maybe pop a quick cliffhanger in. If you're doing a speech, just see if you can put a couple of sentences that finishes it off. Try and have an ending to your piece. Fantastic to see questions coming in. Another question that we often get asked is about spelling, and some of you have been asking questions about vocabulary and things like that. A lot of our students do find spelling really tricky, so if that's you, you're not alone. What I would say is if you can't spell a word, use it anyway, pop it in, because the examiner will be pleased to see you using a sophisticated word. If you've not quite spelled it right, that's okay. So yeah, go for it with your vocabulary, go for it with the words that you're using, even if you can't spell them. Yes, there are marks for spelling, but we'd rather see more complex language used than, you sticking with safe words like nice or good because you know you can spell them. Oh, I want to address this question that's just come up. Sorry, Shamima, I feel like I'm taking over a bit here, but really good question that's come in. What should I mainly be revising? So that's an interesting question for English language because you don't have quotes to learn. Some of you did English literature this morning, and I hope it went well for you if you did, where you have to revise a lot of characters and plots and poems. For language, I would say at this stage, just make sure you know your paper. So if you're doing AQA, download some past papers. Just make sure you're really clear on the types of questions and how many questions there are and how many marks there are. Obviously, if you're with a different board, then do look at the relevant materials. Do also please download number 3 in the file pod, which is our presentation from today, which you can use to help you with your revision. We've worked as a team in English to really try and consolidate and make simple everything that you need to know for that exam. So we have about 2 minutes left. Are there any questions that we have missed? What do you think, Shamima? Is there anything we've missed that keeps coming up?
A few people have asked about the structure for the extended writing on paper 2. So what I would advise you to do is check your question and make sure you're writing in the correct form. So if it is an article, start to think about the structure of an article. It should have a clear heading. You do need to write in detailed paragraphs. You won't need to put in any images or write in columns, but the examiner wants to see that you've actually written a response in detail and that you've applied the writing techniques. So that's the structure you should be thinking about. If it's a letter, then it should open with a correct address. So it should say dear, and if it's formal, it should be dear sir, madam. If it's informal, I would still put dear, but it could be the name of the person that you're writing to. So check the format that you need to be producing for that part of the exam.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice because it will depend, won't it, on what form. Yeah. Articles, very popular, letters occasionally, speeches. But again, looking at your past papers, you will get a sense of the types of writing tasks that come up and help you to prepare. Okay, we have about a minute left. I can see there are still some questions coming in. Really appreciate these questions. And we are lucky to have 2 members of staff with us today who are purely answering your questions. So I think we will begin to wrap things up just to give people time to download. So please do make sure you download the PDF. It's over at the top of the screen. I'm trying to point, but it's losing my finger. There's a PDF of today's session. There's also an attendance certificate, so you've got something to prove that you were here today. And we've also got number 2 is some details about our remaining revision sessions. There are sessions for maths and I believe for science. And we would like to wish you from all of the English team here at Academy21 really good luck on Friday morning for your paper. So paper 1 is this Friday and then paper 2 is the 6th of June. So it's after half term. So we wish you the very best of luck. Do your very best, answer all the questions and get in there with your writing as well. And thank you very much for attending today. Lovely to see some really positive comments coming through in the Q&A. Thank you so much,
Thank you,
everybody.
everyone. Good luck, everybody.
Good
All the
luck.
best.
Bye, everyone. Thank you for being here and good luck.